I'm not, there you go. Thank you.
Is it working?
It is. It is. So, before we get into the word itself, I'd like to take a few minutes for anybody that would like to share a time in their life where they had to tackle something new, something that was maybe a stretch, you know, and how did you feel during that time? And
when I took the job traveling, I had been a teacher and a principal, and then I took a job for a foundation in Utah. And it meant that I had to start traveling. I was single, so my children were from middle school, so I was excited about it. But I had done some seminars like I was going to be doing, but I hadn't been teaching all day, 5 days a week, but for a whole week, you know, from 8 in the morning till 5 in the afternoon for a week. And it was strenuous physically. Of course, I was excited, but it was quite an adjustment to make. And I was glad I could take it a day at a time. And I did a lot of prayer. I remember specifically the final prayer that we say in the service about send us out into the world. Peace. That was very meaningful to me. Before I would go to the airport and fly out that afternoon and come back Friday night. So.
how long did you do that?
20 years.
Wow.
I didn't do it every week. I mean, you know, and sometimes I'd do it 1 day or 3 day. Once I flew to Hawaii and did a seminar the next day and flew back that night.
Oh, Lord.
I could have stayed, but I was by myself, and I had been before with my mom and with another time when I was teaching with a friend, and so it was the year I bought my condo down here, and I really wanted to get back. Be in my condo instead of being on Oahu. So I went to every state in the Union except North Dakota and Maine during that 20 years.
You went to Alaska?
I went to Alaska twice. I went to Jamaica, which is not a state, but I went to, yeah.
What about Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands?
Well, I didn't do that. Those are territories.
Mm-hmm.
I so glad you know that. But it was an adjustment, a very, you know, it was a very big adjustment. But I loved it. That's why I kept doing it. And teachers are wonderful to work with. So.
Well, you had a good program to deliver too.
Yeah. Well, I believed in what I was teaching, so that, you know, I mean, I'd done it myself and I knew it worked.
Wow. Anybody else?
Well, when I had to go over to India by myself to get ready for my family to come, because I had a job and I was already a day late getting there because of delays, and so I didn't even know if the people who were supposed to meet me on the other end, who I did not know, were going to be there. And then all these people were not speaking English, so it was really pretty scary because I had to find a place, a permanent place for my family to live. Didn't know when they'd get there. Had to just, it was something else again. But you know, you do what you have to do, don't you? You figure it out.
Once you make the decision,
And you know, then you're stuck and you just say, well, you know, help will come.
But I can't imagine that, Betsy, how hard that was. I've heard you talk about that before, and I've been going to a foreign country by yourself.
And your kids were small then. The girls were
11 and 15. I have to add 4 to the 11. Yeah.
okay, but not that
And they were
small.
with their father, which was another concern. Into a little trailer. We rented our house out, so we were gonna be gone a year. but it was 3.5 months before they got there. Because of the visa thing, so I was by myself for 3.5 months, trying to figure out how to do it, but, you know, I had support, and I had good people there at the school where I was teaching. So, you know, but you don't know what you can do until you don't have any other choice, right? So.
And how did the girls feel about that experience?
Well, you know, we drug them kicking and screaming, but they wouldn't think twice about going somewhere. Lucy did 2 trips abroad during her college, you know. She went and spent, I don't know, several weeks in Puerto Rico. When she was in college, she did a semester abroad, and then when she was in vet school or wherever, she did an externship in Puerto Rico. So, you know, Sarah would go by and say, huh?
Gave them courage and confidence.
And when you are in a place where every outcome of life you could see in the street, in a 5-minute walk, from the very richest to people literally living on the street, it changes your outlook about what's important in life. You know? And you don't look at a blank piece of sidewalk without thinking somebody could be living there, you know? But anyway, yeah. So there are a lot of things. But anyway.
That was really brave, I think.
Well, you know, I feel if I can do that, I can.
You can do anything.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
Anybody else? It's kind of hard to talk.
I'm sorry. Madeline made me think of it by her story. That traveling by yourself is hard, isn't it? It really
Yeah,
is.
it gets old. When we first, you know, way back in the day when we used to dress up to go on the plane, we'd wear gloves and heels and hats. And oh my God, it was ridiculous. So it did get better. But the bad thing about my traveling was all the books I had to carry.
Lugging
That's
all
what
that
did
heavy
my
stuff.
back in. So
Oh, wow.
yeah. So I mean, I guess that's what did it. I'm assuming that's what did it. I'm pretty sure that did it.
Well, some of you have heard the story of how I ended up here, but in 2011, my uncle, who had lived down here since '96, was having health issues and decided he needed to come back up to the DC area to be around family. So he had a house here, and at that time, I guess this was really maybe even earlier, around 2008, the housing market here was not good. So he and I made an arrangement where I would, you know, take over his house, and I would go back and forth until I retired. And at that point, I was planning to work well into my, 60s, so it would be, 2018 or 20, whatever, that I would move down here. But then in the end of 2012, I was made an offer I couldn't refuse to retire early. And so I did, and so I retired the end of November, and so it was like, well, I have a house in South Carolina and a house in Northern Virginia, and on a retired person's income, I can't afford both. So I decided the market was fairly reasonable in Northern Virginia, so I cleaned out my house and got it ready to go on the market. And on the 1st of February, I put my house on the market. The 4th of February, I had 4 offers. I took the one that was $16,000 over my asking, and I said, okay, God, I guess we're going to South Carolina. And on the 11th of March, I settled, and then my friend Kathy, that some of you know because she went to Israel, she and I drove a U-Haul. She drove the U-Haul, and I drove my car down here. And, everybody said, what are you doing? And this was, of course, a time that I really was like, God, tell me what to do. And I would have appreciated a personal visit. But my relationship with God has always been an affirming after the fact kind of thing. So people said, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I go down there. If I like it, great. If I don't, I clean out another house and sell it and go somewhere else. And then the first day, that Sunday after that Tuesday that I moved in, I walked into church and Betsy and Madeline greeted me after the service because I'd introduced myself, invited me to lunch. I don't think I went that day because I was pretty exhausted, but I think the next week. And I was just unbelievably amazed at how from that first visit, I felt at home. You know, because Episcopal churches are not always known for their warm embrace. So that was my final affirmation that I knew that I was where I was supposed to be.
That's a great story. Took a lot of courage to do that, didn't it?
Not as much as going to India, but,
True.
but you know, I was at a time in my life, and it was the first time in my life that I was responsible for no one or no thing but myself. And that was very freeing. You know, as was cleaning out my house. And the house I had in Virginia was the house that my parents moved to while I was in college. And after my mom died, my dad decided he didn't want to be in that house by himself, so he moved to a condo, and I bought the house. And of course, all the grandparents had died, and my mother and father were the oldest, so everything kind of came to their house, and people came and took what they wanted. And so I was faced with my grandmother's wedding veil, my mother's satin wedding gown that had not been preserved and was yellow and ripped, and you know, the dress I wore in my aunt and my godmother's weddings in 1960 as a flower girl. So, but then I found myself getting freed as I just let go of things. You know, I gave away as much as I could. I recycled as much as I could. The important things like, you know, my grandfather's vest that he wore every Christmas with, you know, my grandmother had made, I took a picture of it. You know, I took a picture of my flower girl dress. I took a picture of the gown that my grandmother had made for me to go to a ball with her when I was in the 5th grade. But that whole process was pretty miraculous. Well, now let's turn to Moses' experience. And it's a fairly long reading, so I thought maybe we could take turns. If Betsy, if you'd start.
Well, I don't know where we are in here.
Exodus chapter 3,
Chapter 3.
verses 1 through 15.
Okay, so I'll read what, verses 1 through...
Well, just read a little bit, and then, you know, we can just go around.
Now, Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Cora, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. That would be startling. And Moses said, here I am. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. Then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. I'm going to keep reading, huh? The Lord said,
Well, you can stop and let somebody else read.
Let somebody else read. Okay.
Who wants to read?
Just go around.
I'm having trouble with my glasses. Finding them.
I know, it's kind of hard to read.
Then the Lord said, I have seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. Could you close that door? I heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their suffering, and I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of Egyptians, and to bring them up out of the land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Ammonites, and the Perizzites, and the whatever. And now, behold, the cry of the people of Israel has come to me, and I have seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppress them. Come, I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring forth my people, the sons of Israel, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the sons of Israel out of Egypt? He said, but I will be with you, and this shall be the sign for you, that I have sent you when you have brought forth the people of Egypt. You shall serve God upon the mountain. How far are we going?
To 15, so maybe Brenda could.
But Moses asked, if I go to the people of Israel and tell them that their father God has sent me, they will ask, which God are you talking about? What shall I tell them? The sovereign God was the reply. Just say, I am has sent me. Yes, tell them Jehovah, the God of your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my eternal name to be used throughout all generations. 15 seconds.
Wow, that really is different.
Because that I am, I think we talked about I am some other time.
The wording in your Bible is very different.
Yeah, mine says I am who I am.
Yeah,
Well, this is living God, which is.
okay, yeah. It says the same thing basically, but it's very different wording, yeah.
Well, we could read different versions
Oh,
of that
yeah.
if anybody wants
Yeah,
to.
verse 15
Caroline,
was,
what is yours?
Mine is the New Revised. No, mine's just the Revised Standard.
That's what I have.
If you start at 14, God said to Moses, I am who I am. He said further, thus you shall say to the Israelites, I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, thus you shall say to the Israelites, the Lord, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and this is my title for all generations.
that verse 15 is a lot longer than what you're saying.
Yeah.
Has a lot more in it.
Yeah.
But it said the same thing, it just,
So how are we tying that into what we were talking about earlier?
Well, I sort of felt like God was telling Moses to go tell the king of Egypt, the Pharaoh, to let his people go. I mean, if someone told me to do that, it would be like, go tell Donald Trump to get out of the White House, please, or you know, whatever.
Yeah.
It would be a little daunting. And it's also just the fact, I mean, while in many ways I would love for God to come down and have a conversation, it would be a be careful what you wish for kind of scenario, because I imagine it would be pretty terrifying. I mean, to be standing by a bush that's burning like crazy and isn't burning would be
Yeah.
just, I mean, it would distract me, I think.
And then God starts talking to you out of the bush, I would think, yeah.
So that's kind of why I thought we would start with that kind of conversation to look at what Moses is faced with. And even knowing that God was sending him to do this, would anybody believe him?
He's not telling him, you're gonna know right away when you get there. He's gonna say, like, after the fact, you know, when they ask you who sent you.
Well, they all said, which God are you talking
Yeah,
about?
oh yeah, oh no.
Yeah, especially when you're talking to, you know,
All these different people whose names you
Canaanites,
can't pronounce.
Hittites, Amorites,
Yeah.
and all of the rest.
well, and just starting with the Egyptians that are gonna be kinda like, because he didn't tell him the part about the plagues and all that stuff that would back him up.
But even if I didn't have God talking to me, and I'm sure the same with you all, you felt
Mm-hmm.
that you were doing the right thing, or you wouldn't have done it. I mean, I think God guides us and with the Holy Spirit in helping us to have that feeling of, yes, this is right, or, you know, I'm really doing something I shouldn't be doing, because I mean, I do have that feeling. Y'all know, that's how God speaks to us, is through our feeling that we're doing what would be the right thing, or what He would want us to do.
You know, when I look back on my life and think of the decisions that have had to be made at certain times, I mean, you've had to think about it and pray about it, but you kind of finally knew what was the right thing to do.
And I can think about a couple of times when I did things that I wanted to do, but wanted it to be right more than it turned out to be right. Well, my story that you've all heard of going to John's Island for the interview and having the board say that the reason I was there was because God sent me, and I was supposed to be there. Was an example of that kind of experience, I think. So I was the only white person in the room, and I was originally from New York, and sent to John's Island to fix
That might be a comparison right there between Moses and.
Yeah.
Yeah, just another white person coming.
didn't get one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I've got one. Sorry. Let's see which way.
I got more. I counted wrong, I guess.
Uh-oh. It did. No, we're good.
No, you passed it.
I passed.
Okay.
I got it. Thank you.
So, let's look at the what, if somebody would read that.
Your turn, okay.
God gives Moses a seemingly insurmountable task to accomplish, but God will not allow Moses to assume that he will engage the powers of Egypt alone. Moses assumes he needs more authoritative information, but the voice from the burning bush reminds Moses that he knows more than enough. Thus you shall say to the Israelites, the Lord, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and this my title for all generations.
So really Moses has two people or two groups to be concerned with. He's got the Egyptians, but then you're also talking about he is a stranger to the people of Israel in many respects, because he's been in the Pharaoh's castle, or, you know, whatever,
Cabinet.
for most of his life. So he's got to convince those people to go with him, even if the Pharaoh agrees. So I think he had enough to keep him up at night. So what about the where?
You read that. Let me start in these words. God uses the name Yahweh.
Yahweh.
It's Yahweh Elohim,
Elohim.
Elohim. The Hebrew expression, the Lord God, in reference to God's relationship with Israel's ancestors. In the context of human relationship, God graciously identifies God's self in familial and familial terms. This three-step progression from God's identification of God's self as supreme being, then as supreme being who acts in human history by sending shepherds, and finally as the God in relationship with Israel, is God's way of acknowledging and responding to Moses and to Israel, joining in the common refrain, "Here I am." That was a big revelation, wasn't it? To tie all of that together. I mean, to think of it as three-step progression, I hadn't thought of it that way.
No, I
Maybe
hadn't.
you all have.
History.
No, and I think it's the first time that God reveals himself as I am. And, you know, the beginnings of the references to the great I am come from here. And it was to Moses. And when you think about Moses' life, I mean, being sent down the river as an infant, raised by strangers, and who knows what he knew about who he was.
Probably not.
Well, he was raised by his mother, but still,
But,
he didn't know it was.
right, he didn't know it was his mother, and,
Imagine that.
you know, just that whole scenario and what an identity crisis he had to have.
Well, if you look back, it seems that God put him in the right places. He put him with the Egyptians so he would know how to talk to them. He put them with his brothers and Israelites so he could know how to talk to them somehow. And I think that's where we have our 2020 visions, that vision, I guess, because you can look and see where God placed him up until the burning bush. And he said, now you're ready, and this is what you're gonna do. So, yeah, I think that's.
Sounds like predestination, doesn't it?
Joe Harvard would be so proud of you.
Well, he was the Prince of Egypt at one time.
Yeah.
So he was very intelligent. He was groomed to be a prince. So he had the best education you can possibly have in those days. And then he also got to see the other side of how, you know, where he originally came from, how the Israelites lived. So that was another education. So in preparation, there was a kind of preparation for him to go speak to the Pharaohs at that time.
So he really kind of had the same opportunities in preparation that maybe you could even see with Jesus. But Jesus had a better inkling as to the importance of what he was doing in his youth, where Moses probably was just going from circumstance to circumstance, kind of.
He was being molded, but he didn't know it.
Or for what purpose?
For what purpose, yeah.
Because he probably thought he was going to spend the rest of his days in Egypt. And would have had an easier time. So what does this mean for our lives today? Esther, if you could read that paragraph, please. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, here you go. Moses learned that it was time to let go of the people and as shepherd embraced a new role in the deliverer of the Hebrew people. What old ways of being had been asked to let go of? What current ways of being asked to let go of? What new ways of being are we being asked to claim? Absent the appearance of the burning bush, how do we know when it is time to let go of the old and take hold of the new?
Oh, well. Let's see how it goes. This is pretty apropos, isn't it? Sometimes we don't have a choice.
I'm sorry?
We don't have, sometimes we don't have a choice. We have, like this pandemic has forced us then to do the change in ways that we wouldn't have anticipated. Sometimes we bring it on ourselves, I think, but this time I don't think we did.
No, I don't, I would hope not.
I think all of us have probably had, experiences where we have to let go of old ways. I mean, in this room, we certainly all have had that happen. And I've been, for some reason today, I've been thinking a lot about that kind of thing. I don't know why, but John seems to be over me today for some reason. I was looking at my watch trying to figure out what day of the month it is or something. Is there a reason? But that whole thing of we've had to let go of people, and now during this time, we're having to let go of so much other connection. So it is rather timely that we don't exactly have a burning bush, but in a way we do with this whole experience that we're going through. Because it sure won't quit. It seems to keep going, and we were expecting it not to be so long.
Oh, we thought it was gonna be
keeps
3
on.
months and that would be.
It's like the burning bush just kept burning.
That's a good comparison.
Yeah, and it didn't burn. Right.
Well, and then when you add on top of the pandemic, the wildfires in California, the Gulf Coast just,
2 hurricanes coming.
Yeah.
you know, and they're saying that tens of thousands of people have been asked to evacuate, and evacuating in a hurricane, I mean, in a pandemic is a whole lot different. I mean, it's bad enough to, under the best of circumstances. That I
And the
just,
shelters, look how
That's what I was thinking.
I mean, what-
Shelters,
yeah.
They're not prepared.
they cannot pack them in like they did during Katrina in the dome, you know where it is.
Superdome, yeah. Superdome.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
Or the
I mean, it's
Astrodome, which they
impossible.
did in Houston.
True, same in. Except I think Cora's now moved a little further west coming in, so closer Houston than New Orleans.
Which it means that she has the opportunity to get stronger.
Oh,
Because
yeah,
they're saying it's like 90-degree water that,
yeah.
you know, further west.
It'd be a minimum cap too, minimum.
so are they saying it should hit west of Houston? Is that what you're saying?
No, about Houston.
West of the,
At Houston.
west of the Miss,
But west of New Orleans.
Orleans.
Yeah, but it still puts New Orleans on the northeast quadrant, which is the worst
Yeah.
part of the
Yes,
hurricane.
it's
They just had a storm a month ago near Houston, whatever the name of it was, I can't remember now.
Oh, yeah.
The ACES or something. Is that
Oh,
what you're talking about?
no, that was the one that went up the coast.
Oh,
Yeah.
What are you talking about, when it hit them?
Yeah, there was, but it wasn't a huge one. It
They've
wasn't.
been naming everything during this time too. Well, I've got grandchildren in Houston, so great grands, I sure hope it doesn't.
Well, and look at the rain effect we had yesterday
I know.
from Marco.
And how far away that was.
And what's Laura gonna bring us?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How much rain do we have? Do y'all hear?
I have over 3 inches. I checked my gauge 2 days, 3 times, and it was over 3 inches.
Huh.
I mean,
Maybe
I
y'all
throw
got-
out an inch and I go back and there's some more.
I got a lot of rain, but I don't feel like, I mean, I don't know, because I don't have a rain gauge, but
Yeah.
it did rain. I had to go out in it yesterday. It just was annoying, really
Well,
annoying.
it rained so much early, like it.
And early and then late, I mean, we had.
And then
It was,
Yeah.
yeah, I didn't know,
Me too,
last
yeah.
night before last.
I mean, just, it's been crazy.
So how do we know when it's time to let go of the old and take hold of the new?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's ripped out of your little grubby hands, you know.
I mean, we don't have a choice, but how do you know? You have to-
Sometimes it's very easy, and other times it is so difficult, so difficult.
Well, and even look at this pandemic and how, in retrospect, slowly the United States reacted in terms of closing down and
Well, I think the most interesting thing about this is we watched their TV march across the world. You know, Brazil turned red and something else started red, and then it came up this way, we saw France turn red. And I thought that was weird. You know, we just saw this thing march right across. the
oh,
world.
especially Italy. I mean, because
Yeah.
Italy was in the early days where, you know, the streets of Rome were empty.
And then were still not in the red zone, you know, but you could see it coming and you knew it was gonna come.
But you still got people that won't put on a mask.
I know.
I had to speak to a man in Holly's Island Bakery
You
a couple of
did.
days ago. I did.
What do you say?
I just said, you need a mask.
I love it.
And he said, oh, and I started saying, I'm an old lady and an old woman, and he said, oh, I'm so sorry. And he ran out and got his mask. I went, yeah, it's a doctor. But I didn't know that. I stood there and I thought, am I gonna say anything to him? And I thought, yeah, it's my responsibility to say something to him. And so he went back to his car and got a mask. But,
Well, at least he didn't, was not.
no, he wasn't ugly. That was, I guess he saw as an old lady.
Well, I mean, isn't that part of what this is saying too, is that it's really hard to make these changes and to remember that,
Yeah.
I mean, you know, you have masks stuck in the pocket in the side of your car and in your purse and
Right.
in your pocket, and you can still
Forget.
forget, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I just found that from my experiences that, my father was a minister, and I found out that whenever he had to make a decision or that he had to, that was kind of life changing for him, he prayed. He would pray like almost day and night, and he was not quick to make that decision. It always felt to me, watching him pray, that, you know, day after day, that he would find his way through prayer. And that was my witness of how he came to his, how it evolved for him. And I think a little bit of that has rubbed off on me too.
well, I can't see how it wouldn't.
Yeah.
But what a wonderful example.
Yeah. That's,
How would you know that he was praying? Did he incorporate the family with it? or-
no, he would go into his room, and he always left the doors open. And I, you know, I said, why would you close the door, leave it open? And maybe that was his way of kind of teaching us.
Yeah, letting you know.
And letting you know, this is my time with my God.
Mhm.
This is when I open myself and reveal myself, and how he communicates to me.
Did he pray out loud?
Sometimes he did, sometimes he did. There he has to kind of close the door to give you, I thought it was being kind of giving him some privacy.
Yeah,
No.
he did.
That's it. The,
It's a great example.
Yes, he was.
I didn't know that at the time, let me tell you that right off the bat. I didn't know, God, this is a,
And I think what you said about taking time, I think that is, as I said earlier, that's when I found it easier to make decisions if I don't try to do it right away, cause I'm impulsive, I'd love to just take it now and go on, but slowing down and kind of
Putting the
being
brakes
open
on.
is, makes a difference.
Well, maybe he wanted to make sure the door was open so the Holy Spirit could come in. Because as soon as you said that, it made me think of Eulalie Fenhagen, whom many of you knew. She insisted that the people at Arbor Landing know that when she died, she wanted her window opened, because she wanted to be able to get to heaven.
She wanted what open?
To be her window.
So her spirit was
And they did. They opened the window for after she
I
died.
would think that there would be a lot of traditions throughout the world that would have that kind of, I think the Indians have that kind of incorporation in their.
Which is why the top of the teepee, not just to let smoke out, but
Let the spirits out and in.
Well, and the Jews opened the door for Elijah to come in when they have the Salem meal.
And leave a place at the table.
Yeah. So
So-
it is Elijah, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
yeah, it's Elijah.
I'm second guessing myself. But I remember being surprised that they would leave the door open for that.
So now what?
Now what is God's word calling us to do? The import of this name is that Yahweh cannot be reduced to a characteristic any more than captured in a definition. However comfortable we may be with ambiguity as an intellectual matter, most of us at the level of practical theology want everything sorted out, logical, definitive, and clear. Yahweh will fill out the content of the character implied in the divine name as the promised constancy and fidelity unfolds in history. In Exodus 22, Yahweh will offer content to the name. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. So does that mean we have to be open?
Patient.
Does that window have to be open for things coming in as well as going out?
And you could say that's our heart. That's not to be open.
And if God doesn't always reveal himself right away, takes time.
You know, you say, wait on the Lord and be patient.
That's the hard part.
Yeah.
For me.
Yes, me too.
All of us do. That's a human trait, I think. We want things to happen right away, you know.
We don't wanna be stuck in the middle, not knowing where to go.
Well, something that struck me when I read this yesterday as I was preparing was out of the house of slavery. Thousands of years ago, the Israelites were delivered from the house of slavery. And yet, even to this day, thousands of years later, we're still dealing with the issues and the residual impacts of slavery in one way or another. And even more so at looking at the church's involvement and complicity along the way. It just,
Been in every culture. Hasn't it? And yet we never seem to be able to get it.
Do you really think we'll ever fully deal with slavery? Do you really think it will ever completely disappear? I don't.
Well,
Are you talking about world?
I don't think people will ever have the capacity, and I'm not just saying here in the United States, in the world. I think you're always gonna see slavery in different situations, different countries, because people like to control. Until you eliminate control factor and control freaks, you're always gonna have it.
But if you don't have somebody in charge, you also have chaos, so that it can go either way.
Right?
I don't mean, but we don't have to be mean about it, we don't have to be unfair about it.
No?
You can have the benevolent dictator. But I think to some extent you're very right. And that's really makes me sad.
Girl,
Yeah.
that's
I mean, it's saying that greed and self-interest will always trump.
Power, another good word.
Power.
It is.
Yeah, control freak, power, selfishness,
Money.
all of it, I really think contributes. Even though originally it was for the workforce, originally. I'm not saying it was right. I'm not saying any slave was ever treated decently. A few in the Bible, yes, but other than that, I'm not sure you really can find a recording of slaves. No, I'm wrong. What's her name with Thomas Jefferson? Sally
Hemings.
Hemming. Yeah, she was probably treated better than,
But she was still owned.
but she was
She
still
wasn't free
owned.
and her children, though fathered by a free man,
Right?
were born into slavery.
Right?
you don't hear about all the slavery that's still going on, like in South America and India and places like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, does not seem to be any groundswell in some other cultures that we would help.
Well, and as Deborah said, there's also this situation because of socioeconomics of effective indentured servitude where you may not, but your economic circumstances make it such that you have no choice.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in China, they're
Yeah.
treating the Uyghurs like the Uyghurs have you pronounce it?
Well, and the human trafficking that's happening right here in this country.
Hmm.
People are essentially slaves. It is scary. I think it's human nature to try to control people and to take, whatever power you have. I'm afraid you're probably right, that it will be with us because of the nature of people.
Sometimes you can be right and you really don't like it
No,
because the prospects are just not good.
No, especially like in terms of like human trafficking, which is just, but effectively, that's what happened to the African Americans that were brought here to South Carolina. I mean, they were trafficked.
Mm-hmm.
They were taken out of their homes and off the streets and put on boats.
And I think I read yesterday, or heard one of them, that during the pandemic, the people and organizations who were trying to fight the trafficking have sort of fallen apart and haven't been able to do as good a job as they had been doing, which was terrible to read. I just hadn't thought about it affecting something like that, but of course it would. It's affected everything.
no.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting to 100 years from now read accounts of 2020
Yeah.
and the fallout that we haven't even begun to see. And I think there'll be very good things that come from it, but
I hope.
it's just been such a bizarre time.
But I think we're gonna see the influence of it on our children more than, not my children, but like grandchildren, the younger generation. And even the little ones going into school, how are they gonna be?
Well, yeah, because school, I think, is gonna be forever changed.
Oh,
Yeah.
It is. And then even right now, parents don't really know what's gonna happen in a week and a half. They really don't know. Lucy still doesn't know how Grace is gonna actually start school. Until they call and say, well, there's no room for her to come into the classroom, you gotta start, they'll all start remote. But really, they are not gonna know. And that's kind of
So are
scary.
you gonna move to Charleston and?
No, it's just, but there's so many, like Bill was saying, there's so many things that depend on so many things that depend on so many things, and certain things aren't gonna work like they used to work. And so, and that's just one child and one family, so it's everybody.
And then you look at the number of single parents.
Well,
And-
or parents with children. Now, I was talking to someone who has a child, you know what I'm talking about, who has a child who has special needs. Who's gonna how are they gonna do that? How do you do that remotely?
Yeah.
Do you do it through a homeschool thing, or do you do it through the school district so they have some person that they can, I don't know. I mean, I think the kids are really suffering. And the parents.
And the parents,
Trying
and
to figure
teachers,
out.
don't forget the teachers, cause they are.
Oh,
To have to teach, many will have to teach
have to learn how to do it like that too.
in the classroom and then turn around and lead virtual schooling, and they're not gonna get pay raises for that.
No, my granddaughter-in-law was told that the way they were gonna teach, first she thought she was just gonna be the teacher to do the virtual teaching. And she teaches middle school of all grades. And then they told her, you're gonna teach a small group of kids. And while you're teaching that lesson, you're gonna record that lesson. And the children at home and parents are gonna be watching you teach that lesson. And, I mean, she's gotta control the kids in her classroom, plus think about what she's teaching and think about
Whether they can
whether the kids are, and they didn't give her anything, she has to use her own telephone to record. No equipment, no equipment.
Just like this.
This is what I was thinking also, that also is going to affect children and families who don't have internet, who don't have a computer.
I know.
We're gonna start a whole class of human beings in the future who are going to be
Left through the
5
cracks.
steps behind.
Yeah, we've already had
And
that.
how are we
It's just
going
gonna
to
be a bigger.
discriminate against that? Because there will be discrimination
Yeah.
against that. So someone would say we don't know.
Yeah.
But I think we have a glimpse of what that can possibly look like, a future like that. For people who cannot socially and economically afford what's happening right now. Because even in Puerto Rico, it is in the States, and it says it's territory. But the lights and electricity are constantly down. And this is not a third world country, Puerto Rico. This is a fairly, as far as an island, a fairly middle of the class, affluent, not affluent. But, and yet,
Yes.
my nieces and cousins who are fairly affluent don't have electricity every single day.
Don't do that anyway.
And that was even before whatever the recent storm that knocks it.
Maria, before, the one before Maria, and every other one that happened before, they haven't, but that's another big issue. Not just here in the island, but here in this country, down in Texas, and Mississippi, and Alabama, these
Where was this, the most recent storm, they had a rolling blackout because of power outages?
That's California.
California.
Been doing it, because my brother lives there.
Yeah.
I have a daughter in Florida in my.
No, yeah.
In Myrtle Beach.
It is.
Wow.
Well, it's this side of the road, Dr. Shepherd, allergy doctor, Isaiah makes.
Well,
Well, thank you, Dad.
why don't we, finish up by saying that prayer that we love to say together when we can, the prayer that Jesus taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dad.
Just press the red button.
Do I what?
Press the red button.
Oh, okay. Goodbye.